I've been called many things in my 38 years on this bench. Your Honor, Judge, frank by old friends. I've been cursed at by angry defendants, thanked by grateful ones, questioned by skeptical attorneys. But in all those years, across thousands of cases, no one had ever looked me in the eye and said what Richard Thornton said that Tuesday morning. You're nobody. 2 words, delivered with such casual contempt that for a moment I genuinely wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. The courtroom went silent. Not the usual quiet that falls when a judge speaks, but the absolute vacuum of sound that occurs when everyone simultaneously holds their breath, waiting to see if the earth will crack open. Richard Thornton III stood before me in a suit that probably cost more than most people in that courtroom earned in a month. Everything about him screamed wealth. The Patek Philippe watch, the Italian leather shoes, the perfectly tailored jacket, the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been told no by anyone who mattered. He was here for what should have been a simple matter, illegal construction on his estate in the East Side. Building a guest house without proper permits, without required inspections, without bothering to follow the same rules everyone else in Providence had to follow. The citation was straightforward. Appear in court, pay the fine, agree to bring the structure up to code or tear it down. Routine. Except Richard Thornton III didn't do routine. And what happened in the 17 minutes after he called me nobody became the most talked about moment in Providence municipal court history. If you believe that wealth doesn't place you above the law, that respect is earned, not bought, and that some insults demand absolute accountability, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to do will restore your faith that in a courtroom everyone is equal and arrogance has consequences. The case had been scheduled for 10:30 a.m. Miss Reyes called it precisely on time. City of Providence versus Richard Thornton III. Violation of building codes, construction without permits, failure to obtain required safety inspections. Richard walked to the defendant's table like he was arriving at a country club. Behind him came 2 attorneys. Not 1, 2. Edward Castellano, one of Providence's most expensive lawyers, and his associate, a younger woman carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain the entire municipal code. Mr. Thornton, I began, looking at the file in front of me. You're here regarding unpermitted construction at your residence, 47 Blackstone Boulevard, a guest house, approximately 1,200 square feet, built without city permits, without inspections. The building inspector's report indicates potential electrical code violations, improper foundation work, and encroachment onto protected wetlands. How do you plead? Edward Castellano stood immediately. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. We believe the city's permitting requirements are overly burdensome, and I raised my hand. Counselor, I asked your client, Mr. Dabley, Mr. Thornton, do you have a voice? Richard looked at me with an expression I'd seen before on people who believe their wealth makes them untouchable. Boredom mixed with irritation. Not guilty, Your Honor. This is a waste of everyone's time. The structure is built. It's beautiful. It's on my property. The city should be thanking me for improving the neighborhood, not dragging me to court. The city's attorney, Jennifer Chen, stood. Your Honor, the defendant was notified 3 times that permits were required. He ignored all 3 notices. Construction continued despite a stop work order posted on the property. The structure was completed in violation of every notification. I looked at Richard. Mr. Thornton, is it true you received 3 notices requiring you to obtain permits? My property manager may have received something. I don't involve myself in paperwork. Your property manager works for you, correct? You're responsible for what happens on your property? Edward Castellano interjected. Your Honor, my client owns 17 properties in Providence alone. He can't be expected to personally handle every municipal communication. Counselor, if he owns 17 properties, then he should have systems in place to ensure compliance with the law. Ignorance is not a defense, and delegation is not absolution. I turned back to Richard. The stop work order that was posted on your property. Did you see it? For the first time, Richard showed a flicker of emotion. Annoyance. Yes, I saw it. Some inspector tacked a piece of paper to my fence. I had my contractor remove it. It was unsightly. You removed a legal stop work order? It was on my property. I can remove whatever I want from my property. Jennifer Chen stepped forward. Your Honor, removing a posted stop work order is a separate violation. It's also evidence of willful disregard for the legal process. I made a note. We'll address that. Mr. Thornton, let me make sure I understand. You were notified that permits were required. You ignored those notifications. A stop work order was posted. You removed it and continued construction. Do I have that right? Richard shrugged. Your Honor, I don't know how things work in municipal court, but in the real world, when you want to build something, you build it. I hired architects, engineers, contractors, licensed professionals. The structure is safe. It's probably better built than half the houses in Providence. This permit requirement is just the city trying to extract fees from people who actually contribute to the tax base. Mr. Thornton, permit requirements exist for safety, for environmental protection, to ensure structures don't compromise wetlands, don't create drainage problems, don't endanger neighbors. This isn't about fees. It's about the common good. Richard's jaw tightened. Common good. Your Honor, do you know what I pay in property taxes? $187,000 annually across my Providence properties. Do you know how much I've donated to city causes? Over $2 million in the past 5 years. I've funded park renovations, youth programs, scholarship funds. The common good has benefited significantly from my generosity. And that's admirable, Mr. Thornton. But it doesn't exempt you from following the same building codes that every other property owner must follow. Every other property owner isn't contributing what I contribute. I set down my pen carefully. Mr. Thornton, in this courtroom, your tax bill doesn't matter. Your donations don't matter. What matters is whether you followed the law. And clearly you didn't. Richard leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping but his contempt crystal clear. Your Honor, let's be honest. You're a municipal court judge in Providence, Rhode Island. You make what, $140,000 a year? You handle traffic violations and building code disputes. I make that in a week. I own properties worth $47 million. I employ 143 people across my businesses. I have dinner with senators and governors. I've been to the White House twice. You sit in this room day after day dealing with people who can't pay parking tickets. He paused, and I could see where this was going. We're not the same. We don't operate in the same world. And frankly, you don't have the authority or the standing to lecture me about anything. In the grand scheme of things, Your Honor, you're nobody. The words landed like a physical blow. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Edward Castellano's face went white. His associate dropped her pen. Jennifer Chen's mouth fell open. Officer D'Angelo, my bailiff for 20 years, actually took a step forward, his hand moving instinctively toward Richard before catching himself. But I didn't move. Not yet. I sat there for 5 seconds. 7, 10, 12. Letting those words hang in the air, letting everyone in that courtroom hear them, absorb them, understand exactly what had just happened. A billionaire had just told a sitting judge in open court that he was nobody. Then I stood up. When I stand during a hearing, people know something significant is about to occur. But this was different. I came down from the bench. I walked across the courtroom floor, closing the distance between us until I was standing 3 feet from Richard Thornton III, looking him directly in the eye. My voice, when I spoke, was quiet. But it carried to every corner of that room. Mr. Thornton, in the past 38 years, I have presided over more than 250,000 cases. I have seen every kind of person you can imagine, the wealthy and the poor, the educated and the illiterate, the arrogant and the humble, the guilty and the innocent. And do you know what I've learned? What I've learned is that in this room, none of those external markers matter. Not your bank account, not your property portfolio, not your dinner invitations or your political connections. In here, everyone is equal. A single mother working 3 jobs has the same standing as a billionaire. A teenager with a traffic ticket is treated with the same respect as a CEO. That's not a nice idea. That's the foundation of our legal system. That's what the blindfold on Lady Justice represents. Equal treatment under law. I took a step closer. You just called me nobody. You meant it as an insult. You meant to diminish me, to put me in my place, to remind everyone in this room of the vast gulf between your wealth and my salary, your influence and my small jurisdiction. But here's what you don't understand, Mr. Thornton. I don't derive my authority from my bank account. I don't derive my standing from who I know or where I've been invited. I derive my authority from the people of Rhode Island, who have entrusted me with the responsibility to ensure that the law is applied fairly. And in exercising that authority, I'm not nobody. I'm the person who decides what happens to you next. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Richard's face had shifted from contempt to uncertainty. You say we don't operate in the same world. You're right. In your world, money solves problems. Phone calls make citations disappear. Donations buy influence. Attorneys smooth over inconvenient legal requirements. You've spent your entire life in a world where your wealth insulates you from consequences. But this isn't your world, Mr. Thornton. This is mine. And in my world, the law applies to everyone equally. I turned to address the entire courtroom. Let me tell you who I am, since Mr. Thornton has concluded I'm nobody. I'm the son of Italian immigrants. My father delivered milk door to door for 40 years. He never made more than $30,000 in his best year. My mother cleaned houses. They came to this country with nothing, and they taught me that in America you earn respect through character, through service, through how you treat others, especially those with less power than you. I put myself through law school, working nights at a factory. I served as a public defender for 7 years, representing people who couldn't afford attorneys like Mr. Castellano. I was elected to this bench by the people of Providence, and I've sat here for 38 years trying to ensure that everyone who walks through that door gets a fair hearing, gets treated with dignity, gets justice regardless of their circumstances. So no, Mr. Thornton, I don't have dinner with senators. I have dinner with my family. I don't own $47 million in properties. I own one modest home that I've lived in for 40 years. I don't make what you make in a week, but I sleep well at night because I've never had to buy my way out of accountability. I've never had to use my position to avoid consequences. I've never stood in front of anyone and told them they're nobody because they have less money than me. I walked back toward the bench, then turned to face him again. Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Thornton. First, I find you guilty of construction without permits, willful violation of a stop work order, and contempt of the legal process. Second, the standard fine for unpermitted construction is $500 per day from the date of the first notice. You received your first notice 147 days ago. That's $73,500. Richard's eyes widened. Edward Castellano stood quickly. Your Honor, that's an excessive penalty. We request, Counselor, sit down. I'm not finished. Due to your client's removal of the stop work order, his continued construction in defiance of that order, and his contemptuous behavior in this courtroom, I'm doubling the penalty. $147,000. The courtroom erupted. Richard's face flushed red. You can't do that. This is outrageous. I'll appeal this immediately. I'll have your decision overturned. That's your right, Mr. Thornton. File an appeal. But until an appellate court overturns my decision, the fine stands. Additionally, you will immediately cease all use of the unpermitted structure. It will remain vacant until you obtain proper permits, undergo required inspections, and bring the structure into full compliance with all building and environmental codes. If inspections reveal that the structure cannot be brought into compliance, you will demolish it at your expense. Furthermore, you will pay for an independent environmental assessment of the wetland's impact. If damage has occurred, you will fund complete remediation. And you will do all of this within 90 days, or the daily fines resume at $1,000 per day until compliance is achieved. Richard was shaking now. With anger or shock, I couldn't tell. This is personal. You're punishing me because I insulted you. No, Mr. Thornton, I'm holding you accountable because you broke the law. I'm imposing enhanced penalties because you showed complete disregard for the legal process and for this court. And I'm ensuring that you understand something fundamental. Your wealth does not place you above the law. I returned to the bench and sat down. But I'm not done. Miss Reyes, I want a full audit of Mr. Thornton's 17 Providence properties, building permits, inspection records, certificate of occupancy documentation for each property. If any other structures or modifications were completed without proper permits, we'll be having additional conversations. I looked at Richard. You said you employ 143 people. You said you contribute to the community. That's good, genuinely. But contribution doesn't mean you get to ignore the rules. If anything, it means you should be setting an example. The rules that apply to a homeowner renovating their kitchen apply to you building a guest house. That's not harassment. That's equality. Edward Castellano tried once more. Your Honor, my client spoke in frustration. He didn't mean, Counselor. Your client meant exactly what he said. He looked at me and saw a municipal judge with a modest salary and concluded that made me nobody. What he failed to see is that in this courtroom, I represent something bigger than myself. I represent the principle that we're all equal under the law. And that principle, Mr. Thornton, is more powerful than your bank account will ever be. If you believe that arrogance should have consequences, that respect can't be bought, and that judges should defend the dignity of the legal system, share this video. Comment below if you've ever been dismissed because someone thought you were nobody. Because what happens next will show you that sometimes the people with the least ego have the most power. Richard was staring at me with pure fury. I will make sure everyone knows about this. I have connections. I sit on boards. I know the mayor, the governor. This isn't over. Mr. Thornton, are you threatening this court? I'm telling you that you've made a very big mistake. I leaned forward. No, Mr. Thornton, you made the mistake. You had multiple opportunities to handle this properly. Apply for permits, get inspections, follow the same process every other property owner follows. Instead, you ignored notices, removed a legal order, and continued construction. Then you came into my courtroom and decided that your wealth made you superior to the legal process. You didn't make a mistake, you made a choice. And now you're facing the consequences of that choice. I turned to Officer D'Angelo. If Mr. Thornton fails to comply with any aspect of this order, if he continues to use the unpermitted structure, if he misses any deadline, I want him arrested and brought before this court on contempt charges. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. Richard's attorney was whispering urgently in his ear. Richard shook his head, pulled away. This is a joke. You're a joke. This whole process is a joke. I stood again, and this time my voice was harder. Mr. Thornton, you're very close to spending the night in a jail cell. I strongly suggest you remember where you are and adjust your tone accordingly. 5 seconds, 7, 10, 12. That's how long it took for reality to penetrate Richard Thornton's bubble of entitlement. His attorney grabbed his arm, whispered something sharp. Richard's jaw clenched, but he fell silent. Mr. Castellano, I said, get your client out of my courtroom before he adds another contempt charge. You have 90 days for compliance. The fines are due within 30 days. We're done here. The gavel fell. Edward Castellano practically dragged Richard toward the exit. But before they reached the door, someone in the gallery started clapping, slowly at first, then others joined. Within seconds, the entire courtroom was applauding. Not for me, but for the principle that had just been defended. That wealth doesn't buy exemption, that everyone, truly everyone, is accountable. Richard turned back, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. He looked like he wanted to say something, to make one more cutting remark, but his attorney shoved him through the door before he could. And like that, the billionaire who'd called me nobody left the courtroom to the sound of applause from ordinary citizens who understood what had just happened. Justice had been served, respect had been demanded, and someone who thought he was above the law had just learned otherwise. I sat at the bench for a moment after they left, letting my heartbeat slow down. In 38 years, I'd never had to come down from the bench like that. I'd never had to look someone in the eye and defend not just my authority, but the entire principle that our legal system is built on. It shook me more than I'd expected. Miss Reyes approached quietly. Judge, are you okay? That was necessary, I finished. He needed to understand that this isn't about me. It's about what this courtroom represents, she nodded. For what it's worth, everyone in this building is talking about it already. You did the right thing. I hope I did. The right thing isn't always the easy thing, and taking down a man with Richard Thornton's resources and connections could make my life complicated. But that's not the point. The point is that if I back down, if I let wealth and power intimidate me into giving special treatment, then the whole system collapses. Then everyone who walks through that door knows that justice is for sale to the highest bidder. 4 days after the hearing, I received a call from the mayor's office. Richard Thornton had made good on his threat. He'd complained, claimed judicial overreach, personal vendetta, excessive penalties. The mayor wanted to discuss the case. I told him to review the transcript. Every word was on the record. My rulings were based on law, precedent, and the facts of the case. The enhanced penalties were justified by Thornton's contempt and willful violations. If the mayor wanted to question my judgment, he could do so publicly, and we'd see how Providence voters felt about a mayor defending a billionaire who'd called their judge nobody. The mayor declined to pursue it further. 2 weeks later, I received notification that Richard Thornton had paid the $147,000 fine in full. The check arrived with no note, no apology, just a bank draft. The environmental assessment was ordered. And architect plans for bringing the guest house into code compliance were submitted to the building department. He was complying, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. 6 weeks after the hearing, something unexpected happened. I received a letter, handwritten on expensive stationery. Judge Caprio, I'm writing this because my attorney advised against it, which probably means it's something I should do. You were right. Not about the building codes. I still think those are unnecessarily bureaucratic, but about everything else. I came into your courtroom believing my wealth made me important, and your position made you unimportant. I said things that were disrespectful and wrong. I called you nobody because in my world, that's how I've learned to think about people who can't do anything for me. People who don't have the power to advance my interests. You taught me something I should have learned long ago. Authority doesn't come from money. It comes from legitimacy, from principles, from the respect that's earned through service. You had every right to throw me in jail that day. Instead, you taught me a lesson I won't forget. The guest house is being brought into compliance. The environmental assessment showed minor wetland impact that's being remediated. I'm also having my other 16 properties audited to ensure everything is properly permitted. And I'm establishing a fund to help homeowners in Providence who need assistance navigating the permitting process, particularly lower-income residents who find the system intimidating. It's not much, but it's a start. I'm sorry for what I said. You're not nobody. You're someone who has dedicated his life to service, to fairness, to ensuring that people like me don't get away with believing we're above the rules. That matters more than anything I've built or bought. Respectfully, Richard Thornton. I kept that letter, not because it made me feel vindicated, but because it represented something rare. Growth, change. The possibility that even someone as insulated by wealth as Richard Thornton could learn humility when confronted with it. Did he really change? I don't know. Maybe he just got better at hiding his contempt. But the fund he established has helped 47 families navigate the permitting process in the past 8 months. That's real. That matters. And maybe that's enough. 8 months after the hearing, I was invited to speak at a judicial conference about maintaining courtroom dignity in the face of challenging defendants. I told the story of Richard Thornton, not to embarrass him, but to illustrate a principle. Judges are called Your Honor. I told the other judges, not because we're inherently honorable, but because the position demands honor. When someone disrespects the court, they're not just disrespecting the person in the robe, they're disrespecting the principle that we're all equal before the law. And that principle is worth defending, even when, especially when, it makes powerful people uncomfortable. A judge from Boston raised his hand. But aren't you concerned about retaliation? Thornton has significant resources. He could make your life difficult. He could try, I acknowledged. But what's he going to do? He can't fire me. I'm elected. He can't intimidate me. I have nothing he can take. He can complain about me, but the transcript speaks for itself. That's the power of being, as he put it, nobody. When you don't derive your authority from wealth or connections, those things can't be used against you. Another judge asked, "Do you regret coming down from the bench?" Some might say it was too confrontational. I don't regret it for a second. Sometimes you have to meet disrespect head on. If I'd stayed on the bench, maintained that physical distance, my words would have been less powerful. I needed him to see me as a human being, not just a voice from on high. I needed him to understand that nobody, truly nobody, is beneath dignity and respect. The conference gave me a standing ovation, not because I'd been harsh with a wealthy defendant, but because I'd defended something that every judge in that room understood was under constant assault, the principle of equality. The idea that courtrooms remain one of the few places where your bank account doesn't determine your treatment. If this story moved you, if you believe that wealth should never place someone above accountability, subscribe to this channel. Share this with anyone who's ever been made to feel like nobody by someone with power or money. And remember, the measure of a society isn't how it treats its wealthiest members. It's how it protects its most vulnerable from the wealthy who've forgotten that money doesn't make you better, just richer. In my courtroom, everyone matters. Everyone is somebody. And everyone, from the teenager with a traffic ticket to the billionaire with 17 properties, answers to the same law, faces the same standards, receives the same justice. That's not idealism. That's the job. And after 38 years, after thousands of cases, After being called nobody by a man who thought his wealth made him everybody, I can tell you this. There is no greater privilege than ensuring that equality isn't just a principle we talk about, but a reality we enforce. Court adjourned.